Yo, yo, yo. Hold on, everyone. I'll be right there. Excuse me, Farley. Ah! Okay, mommy's gonna start. You wanna go out or in? You wanna go out or in? You wanna go out or in? Wanna show this? Come here. Okay, come on. Okay, hi, everyone. Yo, yo, yo. I have the beginning of what I think might be a migraine. So, not feeling that great. And we will see how long this stream is. I can feel it. I can feel it forming like a cloud in my brain. Yeah, I've been drinking water and I have some caffeine and important thing to start the stream, is it chicken shop date?
Hey.
Hi.
Oh yeah, we will absolutely be watching that on Friday. For sure. Do you want to go in or out? You don't want to be in here, do you? Okay, I'll let you out. Okay. Okay. There you go. There you go. He wants to watch the Jets. He wants to watch the Jets, so he's going out to watch the Jets. HP, thank you for the 11 months. Other DW, thank you for the 15 months. Shiana, thank you for the Prime. Dragon Army, thank you for the 17 months. Concussed, thank you for the 24. This song is so good. I'm in a real Sinead mood. How's your Monday been? I hope you're staying safe and mentally in a good place. By the way, if you had to struggle through Joker 2, I did the other week. Man, that film was so disappointing. No, I haven't watched Joker 2 yet. I have not watched Joker 2 yet. And I'm certainly not excited to watch it, is what I will say. It's just one of those, I feel, I have to watch this movie. Even though I have a fully formed opinion, which I usually am like... don't do that with movies until you've actually seen it. But I think with Joker 2, I've read so much about it, and I expect that it will be pretty much what I've read about it. That I won't be like, wait a second, I don't think that this was very fair. I need to know if it's really that bad. Yeah, you know what might happen, though? I think what might happen is you might go, it actually isn't as bad, because your expectations for it to be a flaming pile of dog shit are so high. You know how that happens sometimes, where then a movie actually isn't like, it's bad, but you you just have built it up to be a crime against humanity. Have you been watching The Penguin? Last night's episode, I think, secured Christine Milioti an Emmys nom. Yes, I have been watching The Penguin. I watched The Penguin last night. She is magnificent. She's just brilliant. It was an incredible episode. And I think she might be the best Batman villain. She's so good. That's all I can say about it. Would it surprise you to know that the Jets are losing? Oh, what? Wait, how? 10 minutes ago, Will came in here screaming that they had scored a touchdown. I thought things were going well. So if they lose, then I guess it's not necessarily Robert Saleh's fault. You know, can't pin it all on him. They're only down by 3. True. Plus, it's quarter 2. It's at the end of quarter 2, but they have time. The Jets are going to be good this year, y'all. The Jets are going to be good. All right, so excuse me. If you're looking for reacts later, I think you'll like this. Cool. Let me save that. I will save that. Okay. Okie dokie. So I do not have Twitter on my phone because I deleted it on stream and I haven't brought it back. And I was doing a lot of things today. So I was late to seeing what happened, which if you know, you know. And I obviously the comments made by Asmongold were horrifying. Just there's no way around that. Like it's just horrifying and incredibly dehumanizing. And I obviously you all know that I for the past year here have spent a lot of time advocating for Palestinians, and I will continue to do that. And also one thing that I try and stay away from, because I think that it is just, I think it's very gross, is real pain and suffering being used as content, as like streamer drama, you know, a tit for tat with clips. So if you're in here and you are just looking to farm clips and I don't know, add to the drama of it all, which it is not drama, you know, genocide is not drama. I don't care what streamer says what, and you know, whatever back and forth is had. And I, you know, one thing that I normally do anyway is I stay away on my stream. I stay away from talking about, let me turn the music down a little bit. Hold on. I stay away from talking about streamers. I stay away from engaging with them when a lot of, you know, a lot of streamers who, you know, clips of streamers that people would want me to react to are for drama purposes, but at the center of what is being, you know, what is being discussed, what is being debated is not anything that should be ever used as Twitch drama. And I don't go on LSF anymore, but I pray that this is not all over LSF and it hasn't turned into some disgusting debate over whether or not Palestinians deserve the right to life. Is what I will say. Because last night, like a lot of you, I saw images from Al-Aqsa Hospital, which has been turned into a refugee, a place for refugees, which is pretty much all of Palestinians in Gaza. And there were tents that were burning and people in those tents. And there were Palestinians who had IVs attached to them because they have already suffered a year of nonstop death and destruction, and it's never ending. And so to see those images and to see, children running from the fires and children who were burned by the fires, it's monstrous. It is. And I so I was late to seeing what Asmongold's comments were, so I missed a lot of it exploding on Twitter. But there's no debate over genocide. There's no moral debate over genocide. It's not this, but genocide is it is the worst thing that you can do to a group of people. And it doesn't matter who those people are. It is morally reprehensible and it's objectively evil. And there's no room for debate on that. So, I think one thing to keep in mind is that I think having a large platform, someone like Asmongold has a large platform, that absolutely needs to be called out, because words are power and words are used to manufacture consent for something like genocide. So what I'm saying when I'm asking people to stay away from the drama element of it is not to not condemn the language that Asmongold used, but to avoid the worst instincts that viewers will have on a platform like Twitch, which is where they lose sight of the reality of what is happening, which in this case is a genocide, and instead lean into the drama aspect. Imagine saying to 43,000 people that they are an inferior race and he doesn't care if they are murdered. Yeah, it's terrible. It's absolutely terrible. And I did end up sending him a message right before I went live. I'm aware too that Hassan had a conversation with him earlier. I don't know how that went. I wasn't aware until after the fact. So I don't know. Again, it's one of those things where there is something that feels so cruel about having a conversation over genocide being something to be condemned or to not be condemned. But anyway, yeah, so I sent him some thoughts, and that is something that, like, I feel like on the one hand, obviously, as I've said, genocide is not to be debated. Whether or not people are deserving of support and of advocacy for their safety and their freedom, that's not something to be debated. But on the other hand, I am aware of the large platform that someone like Asmongold has, and how dangerous it is to use that language. So it is something where I hope that he, the next time, speaks about Palestinians. I think it's preferable if he says nothing. But if he speaks of Palestinians again, for it to be from a place of empathy, and in no way will be providing any justification for the current genocide that is happening to Palestinians. They were burned in tents last night. They were burned alive in tents last night, which is a hideous reminder that the most important thing when it comes to Palestinian, talking about Palestinian culture, the Palestinian people, is that they are free from the genocide that they are enduring, because that is the on the ground reality. So to debate whether or not Palestinians are homophobic or not is it's not even something that should be happening, because these are people who have been brutally occupied for 76 years and are enduring extermination. They are enduring genocide, and that is what takes priority as far as the Palestinian people, is ending that genocide and freeing Palestinians from occupation and apartheid. And then conversations sure can be had of social progress, of fighting for equality for LGBTQ people, for women, just like we're doing here in America, just like we're doing here in the United States, where we have freedom. Point Crow, thank you. Oh my God, huge raid. Huge raid. Point Crow, bless you. I hope you are well. I hope you are well, my friend. And I hope to see you soon. Happy Indigenous Peoples Day. Yes, that's one thing that we will also be talking about today. So, yeah, social justice, social progress happens when a population of people are not being bombed to death, when they do not have to prioritize their literal survival. And in the United States, where we are not under occupation, we do not have bombs raining down on us, we are still fighting for that progress. And so in no means are we a superior culture just because we are not living under the conditions that people in Palestine are. And here's the thing, a reminder, gay marriage was not legalized until 2015. Women could not get a credit card until the mid-1970s. Jim Crow, an extension of slavery, which then turned into mass incarceration. These are all things that are happening still in the in the society of the United States of America. We do not have the federal right to abortion. Women's bodily autonomy is being oppressed as we speak. Like, this is happening in 2024 in the richest nation in the world, in the shining beacon of democracy and freedom. Child marriage is legal in many states in the United States. LGBTQ people are facing an unprecedented backlash. The number of anti-trans bills in the last couple of years, numbers in the hundreds. So, keeping all that in mind, and remembering too that pinkwashing is used by defenders of apartheid states like Israel to justify the continued oppression and occupation of Palestinians. And the irony in waving a pride flag in Gaza that the majority of buildings have been destroyed, hundreds of thousands. We don't even know we don't even know the exact number because the healthcare system in Gaza was destroyed. But at bare minimum, over 40,000 dead in the Gaza Strip, and waving a pride flag to say that we are the superior group because we're down with the gays. How is America this bastion of moral superiority? Like, how ignorant does one have to be? Well, people who view America as superior seem to forget that same America is the tool wielded against these other countries, against these other groups of people that we view as inferior. And it is a way to support American imperialism, and our involvement throughout the world as part of this. Well, we are the righteous. We are the righteous moral beings. We are the defenders of the globe. We are the world police. And all of these other areas, especially in the Middle East, they are bad. They are barbaric. They are backwards. And so anything that we do over there, we do so from a place of goodness because we are the United States of America, where everybody here is free. When the reality is that's not the case. Depends on who you are asking. When it comes to freedom. But we are able to advocate for our freedoms here. And that is something that people in Palestine, LGBTQ people, women, they cannot advocate for civil liberties when they are fighting for their survival. Because to be Palestinian is to be constantly under threat. And it doesn't matter what your identity as a Palestinian is. It doesn't matter if you're straight. It doesn't matter if you're gay. It doesn't matter if you're Christian. It doesn't matter if you're Muslim. It doesn't matter. Because by simply being Palestinian, you do not have the right to freedom. You do not have the right to a life and a life of dignity. And so it's like we're skipping this step when talking about LGBTQ rights in Palestine. We've skipped a whole step where Palestinians were free to begin with and were able to advocate then for LGBTQ rights. And again, this just all feels like something that shouldn't even be part of the conversation, because that argument is used. That argument is used to justify heinous atrocities against Palestinian people, which include queer Palestinians. We're going to save queer Palestinians. Queer Palestinians will have the right to love who they love and love who they love freely, after we've bombed them to death. There is not logic here. So this conversation isn't even something this conversation isn't even something that should take up any of the space. You'll be safe once we've killed them all. Right. Like, where is the where's the logic in that? There's none. There's none. The argument for continuing to brutalize Palestinians because LGBTQ Palestinians do not have total freedoms is it's illogical, because Palestinians do not have basic freedoms. They're even before October 7th in Gaza, their food and water and travel and ability to even fly a Palestinian flag, that was all that was all suppressed. Excuse me. Sorry. Taloshi, thank you for the 7 months. Talia, thank you for the 8 months. So here's a quick little video, and this is from 10 months ago, because queer people around the world are supporting Palestinian liberation, because they recognize that the most important fight here, the most important fight right now, is ensuring the safety of Palestinians from genocide. And queer Palestinians have also said that the thing that is more likely to kill them are the bombs and the bullets of Israel, and not anti-LGBTQ sentiment. Because remember, bombs and bullets, they do not discriminate. If you are a straight person in Gaza, you are not safe from the bombs and the bullets.
The Israeli military has killed more than 11,000 people in Gaza. This comes after Hamas attacked Israel on October 7th. Some 1,200
Timmy, thank you for the
Israelis
19
were killed
months.
and more than 200 were taken hostage. People have taken to the streets in cities all over the world to protest and call for an end to the war, as well as show solidarity with Palestinians. At every protest, we've seen that queer and trans people have been an active presence. Extra attended protests in Montreal and Toronto this weekend to speak with queer and trans people on the ground and ask them why they are marching.
Palestine! You know, as a queer person, I advocate for queer rights, but I think it's broader than that. We need to advocate for human rights.
Yeah.
I'm marching today because the siege on Gaza is killing thousands of children right now, and our own government here in Canada is complicit in funding the Israeli genocide.
My friends in Palestine, queer Palestinians, asked me to be...
LGBTQ Palestinians don't currently have a government to petition for their civil rights to be recognized. They need a state first before they can start the fight for their own freedoms. Yeah, they have to ensure their survival. They have to ensure basic freedoms before they can, before they can organize and march for their civil liberties.
Be here. They want to know that they're not alone, and they want to know that the world stands in solidarity with them.
Right now we're in such an urgent situation trying to put an end to this genocide, and so this just feels like a really small way that we can show up and take action together.
Our liberation as queer and trans people is bound up in the liberation of Palestinians, and it's not metaphorical. It's our government that has been calling to outlaw protests. It's our universities that are threatened to sanction unions that are support of Palestine.
A big part of the Israeli propaganda machine is pinkwashing, so claiming that Israel is some kind of safe haven in the so-called Middle East for queer people, which is not true. Gay marriage is not even legal in Israel.
I often hear those kinds of statements that, oh, well, if you were in Gaza right now, you would be killed, and
It's a meme. It is a meme at this point, and it's what Bill Maher just recently did on his show, where he did the if you were gay in Gaza, they would throw you off the roof. Well, first of all, most roofs are not even remaining in Gaza. Second of all, the people being killed in Gaza are not specifically LGBTQ people, because when you are under occupation and experiencing genocide, it is hell for all. It is there's no one who is safe.
all of this, but
yeah,
I would counter that with just because someone doesn't understand the lived experiences that I live, it doesn't mean that I am for their genocide.
I still think that...
And here's the thing too, okay, you look at past atrocities throughout history. You look at the Holocaust, you look at Jim Crow, you look at whatever. Those all took place during a time when society was not progressive. So would the argument then be applied that, oh, sorry, I'm not going to advocate for Jewish people to not be genocided because queer Jewish people don't have rights? It falls apart. Like, it falls apart when you apply that to any other atrocity in history. Oh, sorry. I think that this thing is actually not something that I need to care about, because this group of people within this group of people who have no rights, this entire group of people, this other small group, don't have the same social liberties that we have in the United States, which, as a reminder, those rights are being stripped all the time. There's an entire party in this country that has been working in overdrive to strip those liberties. And there are a lot of people in this country, in the United States of America, who agree with it. They do not think that women should have bodily autonomy. They don't think that trans people should be allowed to exist safely. You know, so and this is happening in a country that has not been occupied, where the people who live in this country aren't under the daily threat of an airstrike.
Even if someone is homophobic, I don't think they deserve to die.
And personally, my solid...
Even if someone is homophobic, I don't think they deserve to die. And that's what I think as well. For homophobic Palestinians, I don't give a fuck. I do not care. I don't care. And ignoring all else, where how can you have social progress in a society that isn't even allowed to, that isn't allowed self-determination, that isn't allowed basic freedoms? Like, oh, what? You're not out here legalizing gay marriage? You think Palestinians are thinking about homophobia? Yeah. Do you think that queer Palestinians are thinking about the fact that they don't have civil liberties? Or do you think that they are thinking about the fact that they might not wake up tomorrow because a bomb will hit the tent that they are seeking refuge in? That they are thinking about their family members who have died in the past year and died before October 7th? Like, do you think that that's maybe what they're thinking about, is like literally survival, literally, being able to survive? I think a lot of liberals and some leftists have this idea that everyone who opposes them should not have access to the freedoms they advocate for. It's so gross. Right. When we advocate for something like Medicare for all. All humans should have health care. We're not breaking it down based on who's super progressive. You know, if you didn't support Medicare for all, then you don't get Medicare for all when it comes. No, it doesn't work like that. Healthcare as a human right means all humans deserve the right to healthcare, no matter who.
Solidarity for an occupied and oppressed people isn't based on whether they would personally like me. That's such a thin reason. You have to do better than that.
Our contingent has Palestinians at the forefront, but also indigenous people, Jewish people, trans people, folks of all genders, black folks, people of color, like who are queer and trans. Like, we are here, we are out here to support each other, because that's what solidarity means, and that's what this looks like.
Those responsible for inflicting terrible human suffering and those who defend it will use any means to justify it, no matter how grotesque. Now, that's why this matters, regardless.
Also, what was I gonna say? Sorry, I cannot read chat very well. I'm not the best chat reader, but I can't read chat very well because my head is pounding. It is pounding. So forgive me if I am less engaged, because looking at chat is worsening my headache. Just everything on the screen. Sometimes when I get headaches or, migraines, there's just nothing you can do for it unless you lay down in a dark room and close your eyes.
Of your sexuality or your gender identity, I want the straights and the queers alike to hear this. And I think you're going to be surprised by a lot of what you hear. Now, we need to talk about pinkwashing, or the use of LGBTQ people and their rights to justify Israel's brutal oppression of the Palestinian people. That is ethnic cleansing, an illegal belligerent occupation, which is the longest in modern history, a siege, which is also the longest in modern history, illegal colonization, land theft, those settlements, apartheid, as international and Israeli human rights groups have defined it, brutal mass incarceration without charge, torture, mass extrajudicial killings, we could go on. And in the here and now, of course, the mass slaughter of Gaza, combined with an all-out war and the conditions which sustain life, combined with genocidal rhetoric from the top down, which has led to South Africa hauling Israel before the International Court of Justice to face the charge.
This is also an older video because pinkwashing is not new. Let's just keep that in mind. The the argument of, well, queer people in Palestine don't have rights, so therefore all of Palestine deserves to be genocided. That is not a new argument. I was looking earlier at an op-ed in the New York Times from 14 years ago. 14 years ago, talking about Israel and pinkwashing. It has been part of the propaganda playbook, and it is, it's a horrific nonsensical argument, but it's one that is used because it plays well to a Western audience who will find themselves nodding along to, oh yeah, these people should be genocided, including queer Palestinians, because they don't have equal rights. They don't have rights.
Of genocide. Now, LGBTQ people and their rights have repeatedly been used by Israel and its apologists to justify its crimes. This is known as pinkwashing. Israel knows that in the Western countries which provide it with weapons and support, it's those with progressive politics who are most likely to oppose injustices, such as the oppression of Palestinians. And it also knows that these same progressives disproportionately care a great deal about LGBTQ rights. So here's a way of sowing division and confusion among that camp, or even winning the support of some self-described progressives. Now, it should be said that Israel itself is a relative newcomer to LGBTQ rights. It legalized homosexuality in 1988 by repealing the law criminalizing same-sex relations, which was imposed by the British Empire when it ruled Palestine back in 1936. Now, same-sex marriage is still illegal in Israel. For that matter, so are interfaith marriages. But clearly, LGBTQ rights for most Israeli citizens are far better in Israel than in most other countries in the region. And Tel Aviv Pride in particular is used to showcase Israel as a beacon of LGBTQ rights. Now, some important points to begin with. I'm a passionate advocate of LGBTQ rights as an LGBTQ person. I want all LGBTQ people to live happy.
Such a BS argument from people in countries whose governments and people are overwhelmingly homophobic, transphobic, and have shitty views and laws. Like, worry about your own country first before condemning one affected by genocide. Yeah, it's super rich to be coming from anybody who lives in the United States of America. Because as I said, you know, we are the U.S. We are the richest nation in the world, right? We possess a power that most countries in this world don't come close to. And we have still been slow to progress. And when we do make progress, we go backwards. It's a push and pull. And there are plenty of people in this country who are opposed to the progress that has been made and do not want any further progress to be made. It's why trans people who constitute such a small part of the population have been front and center of the Republican Party screaming about how kids are being transed, about how trans people are groomers, and how, making it out to be through their vicious lies that trans people in this country are, one of the greatest security issues. And so, yeah, it is worry about your own country first. Okay. Worry about achieving real, true equality for all LGBTQ people, for all Black people and people of color, for women, for kids, and focus on that, and then understand that there is no world in which genocide is ever acceptable. There's no world in which genocide is ever morally correct. It is always wrong. And that is not a debate.
Secure, free lives, liberated from oppression, persecution, rejection, fear, stigma and abuse and violence, and the grinding misery of the closet. That isn't to say that I regard the oppression of LGBTQ people as the only form of oppression that matters. Vitally important though, of course it is. There are those I call oppression NIMBYs. NIMBY standing for not in my backyard. That's those who only care about oppression when it impacts their particular characteristic, and frankly to hell with everybody else. Now that itself doesn't even make sense on its own terms, because LGBTQ people everywhere do not necessarily only suffer oppression and indeed violence because they're LGBTQ. Far, far from it. That's even true in countries like the one I'm from, the UK. There's a massive gap in lived experience between me, a gay man who's white, middle class, cis, that is my gender identity, corresponds with that assigned at birth, and say a working class Black gay man. I might get a lot of homophobic abuse online. I've suffered street level threats and homophobic violence, or linked to my public platform as an openly gay man. But I don't suffer the systemic form of oppression a Black gay man may suffer because of police harassment, racist persecution by the justice system, discrimination in terms of jobs, education, the provision of housing and other goods and services, high rates of poverty. We could go on. And that's without even discussing the racist and homophobic abuse they may receive as well. Now, in fact, I would never dream of comparing anything I've gone through with that experience. There's a chasm separating us. Now, a queer person is not just a queer person. They can be many other things too and suffer oppression accordingly. And that's an important principle, so let's keep it in mind. Another important principle to keep in mind is unconditional solidarity. I object to the oppression of and violence against civilians, whoever they are and whatever they think. If I saw someone suffering a racist attack in the streets, I wouldn't whip out a questionnaire and ask the victim as they're being bludgeoned to death to tell me their views on a whole range of social issues before I decide whether or not to help them. Again, that is an important principle to remember and extrapolate.
As Palestinians are being bombed to death, they should make sure that their final words are, one, condemning Hamas, and 2, saying that they are down with the gays.
A minority which suffers oppression should make you want to have empathy and stand with others who suffer oppression, though tragically, alas, it does not. And there are so many tragic examples to the contrary. The oppression of LGBTQ people can be used to justify the horrific oppression of other groups, even those groups which obviously include LGBTQ people as well. Now, pinkwashing is part of a long-standing Western colonial tradition of claiming the West's civilized advantages, if you like, as justifications to oppress and colonize those they portray as uncivilized and thus deserving of being oppressed. As much as I'd wish there was a consensus on the horrors of, say, the British Empire to expose this as a self-serving nonsense, I'll instead give an example, a regime I hope there is a consensus on: Benito Mussolini's fascist regime in Italy, which justified its invasion of Abyssinia in 1935 by drawing attention to the oppressive use of chattel slavery there. Now, today's far-right government in Israel includes raging homophobes. The finance minister, Bezalel Smotrich, himself described himself as a fascist homophobe. The far-right national security minister, Itamar Ben-Gvir, took part in anti-gay so-called beast parades and repeatedly petitioned to have Jerusalem Pride cancelled. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu previously appointed the extremist Avi Maoz to his government, who has viciously anti-LGBTQ views combined with misogyny and anti-Arab racism. Now, Israel's shift towards overt far-right politics obviously means the ascendancy of more homophobic, anti-LGBTQ, anti-queer politics. Now, the Israeli state has sought repeatedly to blackmail queer Palestinians. As the Israeli newspaper Haaretz quoted an Israeli soldier in Unit 8200, a military intelligence unit, as saying, if you're homosexual and know someone who wants a wanted person and you need to know about it, Israel will make your life miserable. Any such case in which you fish out an innocent person from whom information might be squeezed, or who could be recruited as a collaborator, was like striking gold for us and for Israel's entire intelligence community. During my training course in preparation for my service in this assigned role, we actually learned to memorize different words for gay in Arabic. It goes on to say that Israel's internal intelligence unit, the Shin Bet, put a cruel choice between gay Palestinians: betray their people by spying for the regime and risk being cruelly put to death, all in exchange for keeping their secret, or have their secret exposed and be ostracized from their families, exposed to violent attacks, and perhaps even murdered. Now, in 2023, a militant group named Lion's Den executed a resident of Nablus in the West Bank, claiming he'd collaborated with Israel, offering intelligence which led to Israel's targeted assassination of 2 Palestinian militants after he'd been blackmailed into collaboration using a sex tape. So there was a striking example there. Now, a key point, of course, here is to actually listen to Palestinian queer activists themselves rather than those claiming to act on their behalf, those who aren't really interested.
Yeah, I think I think an obvious point is that we should be listening to queer activists, especially Palestinian queer activists, when talking about, when talking about LGBTQ rights in areas where they don't exist. But again, when it comes to Palestine, especially in this current moment, it is ridiculous to be having this conversation as if it merits weight while there is an ongoing genocide. I hope we understand that. I hope we understand, but by taking up any space in this current moment where, refugees in tents were burned alive last night, where thousands and thousands of children are being killed, some of whom are being, many of whom have been shot in the head by snipers. Like the violence that is happening in Palestine is what all of the attention must be on so that it stops.
Their freedom whatsoever. They're just using using them to justify the broader oppression of the Palestinian people. Now, Al-Quds is a Palestinian LGBTQ movement, and they offer...
And here's the thing, all right? here's the thing, folks. The way that our brains work is when you have dehumanized a group of people, it literally turns off your brain's empathy. It turns off your brain's ability to be disgusted. And it is why dehumanization and the language of dehumanization is so crucial to abhorrent acts that include genocide. Without that dehumanization, it is a lot harder to create consent for crimes against humanity. And it's one of those things that we're constantly going, how can people look at this and justify this? Well, it's actually simple for a lot of these people in that they have profoundly dehumanized all Palestinian people. So anything that happens to them is not something that will then elicit disgust. There's no line. And so pinkwashing is just another, it's just more justification. It's, oh yeah, no, these backwards barbarians, they're not humane. They're not human beings. So therefore, whatever happens to them is not something that I need to, that I need to morally be against. It creates the justification for violence. Absolutely.
To international activists, 5 ways to support queer Palestinians. One of those asks us to realise that colonialism, patriarchy and homophobia are all connected forms of oppression, and points out that singling out incidents of homophobia in Palestinian society ignores the complexities of Israel's colonisation and military occupation being a contributing factor to Palestinian LGBTQ oppression. They specifically ask us to steer clear of pinkwashing. They say that includes perpetuating or avoiding perpetuating tiresome tropes of presenting Palestinians as inherently oppressive or Israel as a liberal state that protects LGBTQ rights, saying this is counterproductive and factually baseless. They say Israel is a settler colonial state offering no rights to Palestinians, queer or otherwise. And they say their struggle as queer Palestinians is against Israeli colonialism as much as it is about fighting homophobia and patriarchy in Palestine, rejecting Israel's pinkwashing tactics in which they say they lie about saving LGBTQ Palestinians from their society. And that's a crucial point. As we've noted, LGBTQ people are not simply oppressed because they are LGBTQ. Now, as for this go to Gaza and get executed trope, which keeps getting thrown at queer activists who oppose the mass slaughter of Gaza.
This is also thrown at anybody who is against the subjugation of Palestinians. It's, oh yeah, why don't you go to, it's not even just go to Gaza. Now it's just, why don't you go to the Middle East and see how long you last? Which again is part of the process of dehumanization that has been going on for a long time. It's, oh, you as a woman, as, somebody from the United States, go over there and they'll instantly murder you because that culture, those people they're all barbaric. Have you seen the series Exterminate All the Brutes? No, I have not.
Gaza.
Logan, thank you for the 5 months.
This hypothesis was previously tested to destruction by the US model, actor and activist Rain Dove, who did exactly that. Went with a delegation of fellow queer activists to Gaza who were openly, visibly queer, and met with local queer Gazan Palestinians and found themselves not persecuted or killed, but indeed welcomed. Now, in the current onslaught, we've seen the truly hideous spectacle of Israeli soldiers holding the pride flag in the rubble of Gaza, including one which was inscribed in the name of love. Now, the idea of the pride flag being unveiled in the bombed wastelands of Gaza, surrounded by the remains of slaughtered Palestinians, trying to yassify mass murder, is so nauseating it's actually difficult to even think of the words. Since this current episode began, I've been myself bombarded with hundreds or maybe even more, thousands of messages from people who clearly have no actual authentic interest in LGBTQ people or LGBTQ rights, who only refer to us when they think we're a convenient weapon to justify oppressing other people. Many of them are themselves clearly profoundly homophobic. They gleefully suggest that I go to Gaza and be executed, and often go to graphic detail about how that will happen. Some of them keep sending me photographs of gay men being thrown off roofs by Islamist fundamentalists, claiming that's Hamas. None of these photographs are from Gaza or did have anything to do with Hamas. They're pictures of ISIS executions in Syria. Now, some have even mocked up AI images of me
But it's all the same, isn't
being thrown
it?
to my death off from roofs. They've coined a phrase, Hamasexual, which they think is terribly funny. I've been spammed by accounts located in Israel. Looks very much like a coordinated campaign to me. Gleefully reveling in the idea I'd be executed and making up, again, oh so hilarious jibes like queers for Palestine being like chickens for KFC. So what's the truth here? Well, firstly, a bit of history. The general claim that Islam is inherently hostile when it comes to gay people is rather more complicated when you look at history. Now, an important caveat here, the way we see people as being, say, gay or straight in today's world is a relatively modern phenomenon, and we need to be careful about crudely imposing modern concepts on past times. But if we look at the Ottoman Empire, which ruled Palestine until 1918, there was a far more liberalised approach to same-sex relations than most of Europe in the 19th century. A law introduced in 1858 is widely understood as decriminalising same-sex relations across the Ottoman Empire, including Palestine, when it was often brutally oppressed in other places. But even before then, there were many examples of it being tolerated, quite unlike the image of caliphates cultivated by, for example, the likes of ISIS. Now, in the early modern period even, there were lots of references by Western European visitors to the Ottoman Empire to sodomy. And the distinction wasn't about being gay or otherwise. Again, it's just a concept which didn't exist in that sense, but rather active and passive partners. Now, homosexuality was only criminalised in Palestine in 1936 by the British Empire, under the British Mandate Criminal Code Ordinance 1936, with a maximum penalty of 10 years imprisonment. Now, it was actually repealed in the West Bank in 1951 after it was annexed by Jordan. So actually Jordan and the West Bank repealed this law in 1951, 37 years before Israel did, and notably 26 years before the UK partially decriminalised homosexuality. So in the West Bank, it isn't actually...
So I think this is a really important example, the history that he's pulling up here, to show you that Palestinians, like all people in this world, are not innately homophobic. This is not something where by simply being born Palestinian that you come out the womb hating the gays. That is just simply not true. And it's important, even though this is, it seems so obvious. It's something that bears mentioning, because by thinking that Palestinians innately are homophobic because they are, they are Arab, and the, the stereotypes and the way that the way that Arab populations have been so thoroughly dehumanized, and the way that Islam has just been chalked up as a religion of evil. There are over 1 billion, there are over 1 billion people in this world who practice Islam, and that was created by the West. And so they take the, they take the fundamentalism, they take the extremism, and they attribute that to all Arab people being homophobic, being misogynistic, because they are born that way. And ignoring that, one, we all live in a world that is dominated by the powers of the patriarchy, and that social conditioning, which extreme, which religion can absolutely lead to. Social conditioning is what creates that homophobia. It's not it's not something that is specific to Arab people, and certainly is not something that constitutes every single Arab person's beliefs. And again, it also erases queer Arabs. There are queer people all over this world. which include in Palestine, in Lebanon, in Iran, everywhere in the Middle East.
Actually illegal to be gay and hasn't been for a long time. Now, a horrendous story which keeps circulating on social media concerns the truly hideous story of Ahmed Abu Maria. Now, he was a 25-year-old gay Palestinian from the West Bank who was found beheaded after trying to seek asylum in Israel and Canada because of threats from his own community. Now, the misleading narrative was that he was beheaded by the authorities, or when it's posted on social media, that's often the given implication. That's not true. The Palestinian police arrested an acquaintance of his as a suspect. Hideous story. Now, what I'm saying doesn't mean, obviously, that the West Bank is some good place to be gay. It isn't. Despite the law, there's a huge social stigma attached to being gay there. In Gaza itself, the 1936 British law remains. I've previously come under attack on social media for pointing this out, as though I'm saying or letting Hamas off the hook. I'm clearly not arguing that this itself is the fundamental explainer in terms of the plight of LGBTQ people in Gaza. And as we've seen, it can be repealed, as it has been in the West Bank and Israel itself. Now, according to the Human Dignity Trust, a LGBTQ foundation founded by British barristers with the aim of promoting pro-gay legislation worldwide.
Yeah, and also we have made progress in the United States where Christian fundamentalism has always been a part of this country. And there are plenty of politicians throughout the existence of our country who have utilized their power to carry out their fundamentalist beliefs, which means the oppression of women, the oppression of Black people, of LGBTQ people. And so this idea that once Palestine is free, that there is going to be no ability for Palestinians to advocate for social progress is a hypothetical, first of all, because Palestinians are not free. But it's a hypothetical that, like the hypothetical of when Palestinians are free, they will turn around and kill everyone in Israel, is used to justify the continued oppression of Palestinians. Beyond all this, Israel's genocide is killing more gay, trans, queer, or marginalized Palestinians than a theoretical oppressive homophobic regime could ever hope to. Yes, it is dangerous to be LGBTQ in Palestine for the primary reason of that you are Palestinian.
There's little evidence of the law being enforced, and it appears to be largely obsolete in practice. None of this is to absolve Hamas of other crimes, not least the war crimes they've committed against Israeli civilians, or indeed repression committed in other ways against fellow Palestinians. There's no evidence of queer Gazans being executed because of their sexuality. I mean, there have been executions by Hamas for other reasons, overwhelmingly for alleged collaboration with Israel. Also a few examples of, say, murder. Last reported examples were 5 men executed in 2022, and before that in 2017. Now, clearly, someone who passionately opposes the death penalty, all of that should be opposed, but it doesn't, let's be honest, distinguish Hamas in that particular regard from the United States. Now, there is the reported example in 2016 of a commander of Hamas's military wing, Mahmoud Istoui, widely reported as being accused of being gay in the Western media and executed accordingly. But when you read into it, it's far more complicated than that. It seems to be that he was the victim of an internal power struggle. He was accused of various crimes like embezzlement, reportedly professed his innocence of all claims. He was tortured, reportedly went on hunger strike, may have even died in the course of that hunger strike, and then being shot after his death with the claim then that he was executed. In any case, it's...
Why Israel doesn't even try to save those Palestinian gays if they're so moral? Yeah, I mean, queer Palestinians have for a long time not been able to seek refuge in Israel, the only democracy in the Middle East, supposedly a safe haven for queer people.
Extremely unlikely it was due to allegations he was gay. That may have actually just been added to discredit and humiliate him. Now, if Gazans are being imprisoned for being gay, it's actually hard to find evidence of that. That's not to say Gaza is a good place to be LGBTQ. It clearly is not. The major problem here, like the West Bank, and like many other countries in the region, is intense social stigma. Not just countries in the region, many countries all over the world, let's be honest. Now, as Dorgam Abu Salim, a gay Palestinian from Gaza, wrote in the Israeli newspaper Haaretz, there's no doubt that life for a member of the LGBTQ community in Gaza is both arduous and dangerous. I would know. I grew up in Gaza. But what he does is reject what he describes as a well-documented Israeli campaign to vilify Palestinians and exploit LGBTQ Palestinians, all while turning a blind to what he calls Israeli homophobia. He argues that many Gazan youths wish to leave Gaza, not simply because of their sexual orientation, but because of the misery inflicted upon them by Israel's continued siege and its debilitating large-scale military assaults that rendered Gaza nearly unfit for human habitation, as well as Egypt's closure of the Rafah crossing. Now, he also suggests that the 1936 British Mandate Code is open to interpretation, and quoting a Palestinian legal expert, could even allow homosexuality depending on age, consent, and extortion. He also says that the clandestine nature of gay Gazans is a familiar experience nearly everywhere in the world, from rural American towns to conservative Israeli cities and illegal settlements in the West Bank. Palestine is no exception. Finally, he says, to suggest that Gaza's woes begin and end with Hamas is both dishonest and lazy. To say that only LGBTQ people in Gaza are suffering is disingenuous. Now, this is from 2018, before the current horror, which has been unleashed, of course, against Gaza. In another article in the same Israeli newspaper, Haaretz, there's an interview with a queer Gazan who says the gay community in the Gaza Strip is huge and claims that the number of people who are secretly involved in gay relationships is increasing. He says, I know about 150 gay guys in the Strip. I met them all during the past 4 years. And then he adds that it's hard to keep a secret in Gaza. Rumors spread there quickly and everybody knows everything about everybody. Again, that's interesting detail or nuance from an Israeli newspaper. There's a website called Queering the Map, which is pretty heartbreaking, I have to say, in many ways. It allows LGBTQ identifying users to post geotagged posts, and that includes several posts from Gaza. So some examples include a post in central Gaza. Someone has written, the only thing that keeps me patient in Gaza is the sea and you. Another posted at the edge of a pier says, a place where I kissed my first crush. Being gay in Gaza was hard, but somehow it was fun. And made out with a lot of boys in my neighborhood, I thought everyone is gay to some level. Others include messages supporting Palestinian liberation. In solidarity with all my Palestinian brothers and sisters, you are loved. Free Palestine. Another, please know, despite what the media says, there are gay Palestinians. We are here. We are queer. Free Palestine. Then there's this particularly heartbreaking example. I've always imagined...
Yeah, queer Palestinians want to be free, first and foremost, as human beings, right? They're not like, give me my freedom because I'm gay. They're like, give me my freedom because I am a human, and all humans deserve their freedom.
You and me sitting out in the sun, hand in hand, free at last. We spoke of all the places we would go if we could. Yet you are gone now. If I'd known that bombs raining down on us would take you from me, I would have gladly told the world how I adored you more than anything. I'm sorry. I was a coward. Now, clearly being queer in Gaza before this onslaught began was hard. Overwhelmingly because of social stigma. Again, not something specific to Gaza. But queer sexual relations and indeed love clearly did happen. And these same queer Palestinians suffered the horrendous oppression imposed by Israel's 16-year-long siege of Gaza. And of course, many of them themselves, before that, suffered Israeli military occupation and the experience of being refugees or descendants of refugees who were driven from their homes in 1948. And what now? Well, what now? Queer Gazans are having their homes destroyed. 70%, of course, are damaged and destroyed, so that will be the case for most queer Gazans. They've been overwhelmingly displaced from their homes. Proportionately speaking, that will mean 85% of them. They're being left unable to access food and clean water. They're living under the daily terror of bombs. They're being denied medical care. They're losing loved ones, killed by Israeli weapons. They are themselves being maimed and killed. If we estimate that around 3% of any given population is LGBTQ, that means around 1,000 LGBTQ Gazans have been killed by the Israeli military since their onslaught against Gaza began, and it also means approaching 2,000 have been injured. All of these together are far greater horrors than the social stigma they face because of their sexual orientation. So in sum, pinkwashing is a cynical, grotesque attempt to use the oppression of LGBTQ people to support ethnic cleansing, occupation, siege, land theft, colonization, mass incarceration. And before this hideous episode, the mass slaughter of Palestinians, including 6,376 Palestinians who were killed between 2008 and the 6th of October 2023. Again, some of those will have been queer. And of course, now, since then, the horrors unleashed against Gaza. It's got nothing to do with advancing the rights of Palestinian queer people who, like other Palestinians, suffer hideous oppression. Now, the cynicism for all of this is underlined by Western support for, say, Saudi Arabia, a state which engages in far more hideous oppression of LGBTQ people, including numerous barbaric executions. And this whole narrative goes against what queer Palestinians themselves are saying. Like the queer Palestinian activists I've quoted, like Bashar Murad, a queer Palestinian singer who I've interviewed, and like the countless queer Palestinians who've been in touch with me, sending me direct messages since this horror began. Now, indeed, in the here and now, a group called Queers in Palestine have issued a statement entitled No Pride in Genocide, talking of their immense feelings of frustration and disgust at the sight of Israeli soldiers raising pride flags in Gaza, adding, we see through their despicable tactics of weaponizing homophobia and queer violence for colonial means. We need to listen to them. It should not need to be said that the road to liberation of LGBTQ people doesn't come through the murderous oppression of a people who've suffered so many decades of brutal subjugation and now face what many are describing as genocide. And indeed, the apologists for Israeli crimes do not actually care about the rights of LGBTQ people. They're simply using LGBTQ people as a convenient ruse to justify those crimes. Don't fall for it. Don't use oppression to justify others and often far, far greater forms of oppression, and have a consistent approach to fighting oppression. If you really want to stand with queer Palestinians, then that must mean you stand against the overwhelming oppression they suffer as Palestinians, queer or straight. Please like and subscribe. Do share this.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a really clear-cut breakdown of why using queer people and queer rights to justify oppressing Palestinians and to justify genocide is repugnant and wrong. And in this current moment, there is no debate to be had, no matter what, no matter what lines of reasoning, which is really just propaganda that is old. Like, this is not new. No matter what you think will provide a caveat to the genocide being wrong, it doesn't. Yeah. Like, people are, and the sickening thing too, relevant TikTok, okay. The sickening thing too is that like we're having these back and forths while people are dying. Like, there's something so gross about it, and something so dystopic of having these fucking debates, and they should never, it shouldn't exist as a debate. But these debates, as we're seeing images of people burned to death in hospital beds. It's insanity. It really is insanity. And I felt like I needed to address this because it was objectively, the comments were objectively horrific. They were. And the culture of online, and also just the culture in the West, has allowed this language to proliferate and to go without being challenged. It is something where every time we say, turn this around, right? If you're talking about any other group this way, then the horror of using words like that is something that immediately jumps out. And a lot of people would go, whoa, 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 that's terrible. And yet when it comes to Palestine, because anti-Palestinian bias is so strong and has been the norm in our institutions of power, it is, you know, it is allowed to exist, and it is allowed to it's allowed to be used as a genocide is going on, even though we know that no other group of people, if you were to substitute Palestinians for Jewish people, it's unacceptable, because it is unacceptable, but it'd be unacceptable to it'd be unacceptable to a lot of people. Hurts hearing it, because it wasn't just shitting on the whole genocide, but shitting on our culture. No one understands how so many aspects are beautiful. My house is literally Palestinian all over the place, per my mom expressing our culture. Yeah, and it's those are words that were specifically about Palestine, but obviously an extension of all Arab culture, because Palestinians as Arabs are part of just an entire group of people who have been so vilified and treated as barbaric for a very long time. And it is I'm very sorry. I'm very sorry to people who had to hear that. I'm very sorry that is allowed to that kind of language is allowed. It shouldn't be. It's wrong. It's morally wrong. And I can't imagine being Palestinian, and I can't imagine just being Arab and having to constantly hear people debate over my rights as a human being and my dignity as a human. It's awful, and I'm very sorry that I'm very sorry that happened. And it's been happening, This isn't the first time. Anyway. Oh my God, my head. Okay, all right. Let's do some celebration of Indigenous Peoples' Day. C Night, thank you for the 10 months. Let's just all take a collective breath. You don't have to stream. No, I'll be okay. I'll do a shorter stream. But I do. I really did want to go live because I feel like the loudest voices online and the ones that have the biggest reach are the ones that have dehumanized Palestinians, dehumanized Arab people. And so I feel like I need to be here. Sorry, my head is I'm like, oh. I just always want to be a voice, even if it's not as big of a voice, even if I don't have as big of a platform, so that people feel safe and valued. No matter who you are, no matter what culture you are from, you should never have to listen to anybody. You should never have to listen to anybody debasing you. And so, so casually talking about your humanity and that it doesn't exist. So anyway, anywho, this will always be a place where you will feel valued, that your humanity will be affirmed. Okay. All right. So today, it's also just all of this happening today. All of this happening today when it is Indigenous Peoples' Day. It is Indigenous Peoples' Day because fuck Christopher Columbus. Fuck that bitch. So if you are Indigenous, happy Indigenous Peoples' Day. As a non-American, I always feel like most U.S. streamers just never say anything that can cost them their sponsors. You're one of the few that raise her voice. You're an example. The consequences are very real for advocating for human life, for the rights of Palestinians, which should not, in a just world, in a perfect world, that is not controversial at all. That is not something that is something that would ever lead to repercussions for those who did do something like that, because, in a perfect world, we wouldn't have to do that because Palestinians would be free. But what I always say is, it's not, at the end of the day, and by the end of the day, I also mean like the end of my life. When I get to the end of my life, I won't look back on how much money I made, and I won't look back on the superficial aspects of life. I will look back and hopefully see that I did what I could, that when I had a platform, when I had the ability to leverage the small power that I had, that I did that to try and help people. And actually, I mentioned this before. This is Dr. Kate Thomas, who dated Andrew Garfield. So it all comes full circle. But I mentioned her comments yesterday, and I think this is just really beautifully said. And I'm having trouble speaking today, so I'm going to read these. We are all scared. It costs us all to speak up, but whatever you're scared of losing, you should be more scared of losing your soul. Silence is death. What's the fucking point in anything if it's not for liberation? Why cultivate power if when you have a chance to use it, you don't, for fear of losing it? Don't you see the paradox? What is power for? What is leverage for? For what? So many people have devoted their lives to cultivating influence, money, structural power, things I am very familiar with. I help some of these people do just that, but only in service of liberation. But it's always a dangerous dance with the devil, like taking just the right dose of a poison to become immune. You have to remember why you are doing it. What is the point in cultivating power if when you are called upon by world events to use it, you refuse for fear of losing your own position, the benefits that you get? It's repulsive and breaks my fucking heart. We are all tired and disappointed and full of grief, but at least we won't be silent when we have an opportunity to leverage power or audience for good. Onwards, liberation for all. And I think I just really resonate. I really resonate with those words because, yeah, I can link the point. It's just ignore people being like, allegedly the breakup was due to her disappointing him for not speaking up. People are just, they're making up drama. Whatever. That's not the point. Who cares? But these words resonated with me because I'm reminded all the time of why I started streaming. And there's a number of reasons why I started streaming, but one of the main reasons was I wanted to have a platform, and I wanted to cultivate a community of great like-minded people who support things like human rights and are and are champions for one another. And I always felt like I had a lot to say. And I felt very deeply. I feel very deeply. And I wanted a place to be able to channel that and to, to have a platform where I can try and be a light in the darkness, where there's a lot of there are a lot of people with platforms who use those platforms to spread hate, and the influence that they has it's devastating. It's devastating to watch that. People with large platforms use those platforms not to advocate for all humans, but to advocate hatred. And so even though I know, like, the unfortunate reality is I will probably not ever be able to match. No, I'll never be able to match like an Andrew Tate or an Aiden Ross or, any of those wackos. But at least I can try and do what I can with what I have. And to know that it's a part, right? Like I'm playing my part here. And I think it's really important to have these spaces so that the people who are a part of this community feel as if they have somewhere to go, and they don't just look at the internet and Twitch as a cesspool of hate, a place where they're not welcome. And so therefore, we've just got ourselves a wasteland. So anyway, and as I always say, I always try to balance on this stream and do fun things, keep y'all entertained, keep you smiling, because God knows that we need that. But also, also many times here, I have talked about things that are sad and are horrifying to witness. And so I hope that I continue to strike a good balance here, and that this is a place where you can come and not just feel thoroughly depressed, because at the end of the day, that it doesn't service us. Our just falling into a state of despair is not something that I want to do either. That kind of reach is fleeting and ultimately destructive. Having something like this community when you've built is more valuable and productive than anything a Tate, Rogan, or whoever could dream of. Yeah, fuck those guys. Fuck those guys. Anyway, let's talk about Indigenous Peoples' Day. This helps me when I feel hopeless from Lord of the Rings. Is it the same scene as yesterday? Is this the scene that we watched yesterday? Oh. Or when we Ho Kwan. Mr. Sam. Emily, thank you for the prime. I can't. I know, Mr. Frodo.
So wrong. By rights, we shouldn't even be here. But we are. It's like in the great stories, Mr. Frodo. The ones that really mattered. Full of darkness and danger they were. And sometimes you didn't want to know the end. Because how could the end be happy? How could the world go back to the way it was when so much bad had happened? But in the end, it's only a passing thing. This shadow. Even darkness must pass. A new day will come. And when the sun shines, it'll shine out the clearer. Those were the stories that stayed with you. That meant something. Even if you were too small to understand why. But I think, Mr. Frodo, I do understand. I know now. Folk in those stories had lots of chances of turning back, only they didn't. They kept going. Because they were holding on to something. What are we holding on to, Sam? There's some good in this world, Mr. Frodo. And it's worth fighting for.
Oh my god. This is why I just watch Lord of the Rings all the time. There's some good in this world that's worth fighting for. Oh my god. Just Lord of the Rings just really hits, you know. I always felt like I've seen Lord of the Rings so many times. During that scene when Gollum takes in what Sam is saying, I'm like, yes, Gollum. You can resist the power of the ring, Gollum. You can. You know, for a moment there, it seems as if Gollum's going to join the good fight. But yeah, you know what? Lord of the Rings is a movie, but it hits. It hits. And it is a reminder that there is good in this world that is worth fighting for. So not us all out here crying to this Lord of the Rings clip. Oh. Samwise Gamgee is he's just the best. He's the best. I love him. And also Sean Astin, the actor Sean Astin, he just reminds me so much of Sam too. That is an example of someone who really feels like a character that they're very famous for playing, like that character. Yeah, he's an awesome dude. He is. Okay, y'all. So today is Indigenous Peoples' Day. And 3 years ago, Joe Biden became the first U.S. president to formally commemorate Indigenous Peoples' Day. But Indigenous Peoples' Day is still not a federal holiday. So we celebrate Indigenous Peoples' Day, and there are over like 100 cities that have adopted this holiday. They still have Columbus Day, but like Columbus Day never went away. But Indigenous Peoples' Day has become more and more of a holiday that has been adopted by cities and states, but it still needs to be formally recognized, needs to be a federal holiday, and there has still not been a single U.S. president who has acknowledged the U.S. government's role in causing a lot of harm to Indigenous people. And so it's not just a day of celebration, it's also a day of awareness, a day of advocacy, a day for people's attention to be turned on indigenous people in this country, and the fact that they are really affected by issues like climate change because of how much fracking takes place on their lands. And of course, we talked about the missing and murdered Indigenous women. I covered that a month or two ago. So it's a day to celebrate Indigenous people, but it's also a day for advocacy and awareness.
In recent years, states, counties, and cities throughout the United States have increasingly been choosing to recognize Indigenous Peoples' Day, often in lieu of Columbus Day. Both holidays take place on the second Monday in October. Last year, President Joe Biden became the first U.S. president to formally recognize the holiday. Though not yet an official federal holiday, a bill is pending in Congress to make it one. Columbus Day was made a federal holiday in 1934 and arose out of an earlier movement to honor Italian-American heritage during a time of persecution of Italian immigrants and following a mass lynching of Italian Americans. But to many Indigenous peoples, Columbus Day is an affront to a history of centuries of genocide, forced assimilation, and discrimination.
I have to go pee.
The origins of Indigenous Peoples' Day are from the 1977 First International NGO Conference on Discrimination Against Indigenous Populations in the Americas. One of the key recommendations to emerge from that conference was a refutation of the doctrine of discovery, the notion that Christopher Columbus discovered the Americas, which led to a declaration from the Pope that Spain owned all the Western Hemisphere and its peoples no longer had any rights to the land. Columbus, born in Italy, was an explorer whose ship landed in the Caribbean in 1492. He never set foot on the land, now known as the contiguous United States. Columbus and his men enslaved, raped, and tortured the native people they encountered, bringing with them the institutions of colonialism. Prior to Columbus's arrival, more than 60 million Indigenous people are believed to have lived in the Americas, with some saying 100 million. A little more than just 100 years later, there were about 6 million people remaining. A population decline so swift and substantial that researchers have determined the planet's temperature dropped by 0.15 degrees Celsius due to a decrease in greenhouse gases with the loss of so many people. Part of the motivation to replace Columbus Day with Indigenous Peoples' Day is to challenge the doctrine of discovery and provide a more complete look at U.S. history. However, some believe that a holiday is not enough to remedy the injustices that Indigenous peoples have experienced and point out that no U.S. president has ever made an explicit apology for the treatment of Indigenous peoples.
Because for them to apologize for the treatment of Indigenous peoples, it would open up the door then to recognizing that settler colonialism is objectively wrong, that it is morally reprehensible. So yeah, at the very least, what they could do is apologize, but that admits to guilt, and then that starts the domino train of what else are we guilty of? What other mass atrocities have we directly or indirectly been responsible for?
Honor Indigenous peoples also exist in Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Taiwan, Venezuela, Norway, Bolivia, Brazil, and elsewhere throughout the world. The UN International Day of the World's Indigenous Peoples takes place on August 9th each year.
Andrea Jimenez, founder of Herb Club LA, leads a garden tour at the Getty Museum in Los Angeles during a festival celebrating Indigenous Peoples' Day. She shows the visitors native plants to California. For example, yarrow, a flowering plant that is known for its medicinal properties.
So native peoples who could use it for healing wounds, for healing indigestion, for healing, all sorts of things. And it has been known as one of those plants that is called a panacea.
The third annual celebration of Indigenous
Oh,
Peoples'
that's
Day
at the Getty.
The Getty Museum drew about 2,000 people, making the event one of the biggest in Los Angeles, says festival founder Chelsea Anderson.
The mission of the Family Festival is to share resources of artists and makers from Indigenous diaspora in Los Angeles. We love the educational component of sharing traditions of the past, but also we really celebrate contemporary voices and contemporary artists.
One of the artists, Shigo Belilitso, a dancer with the Wild Horse Native American Association, says Indigenous Peoples' Day brings recognition to his people who lived on the land before Europeans came.
I remember growing up, a lot of some teachers, they didn't even know we would exist. Some people think we're extinct, and we're not. We're here, we're alive, we're well, and we're thriving. And we're passing this to our next generation, our singing, our dancing, our traditions.
The state of California does not observe Columbus Day, having replaced it with Indigenous Peoples' Day in 2019. Solange Aguilar, a Native American poet, says growing up it was a struggle celebrating Christopher Columbus Day.
There's this story about him that he discovered America, but you can't really discover something when there are already people there. It's important to learn that history.
America!
And understand that he was a really bad guy. He was awful, and those history.
She's like, he sucked. Fuck that guy. Sounds like land without a people without a land. Except actually there are a ton of people here. There are many people here. Are you blind? It's looking out at a lot of people and going, "Oh man. Looks like nobody's here. I can't see anybody. I've discovered a land where there are no people who have been living here for a long time."
Give him that mythos or whatever is a real thing. That's a real trauma that we carry.
Erica Barenwal, who moved last month to Los Angeles from Columbus, Ohio, is celebrating Indigenous Peoples' Day with her family for the first time. She believes recognizing Native peoples will make a better future for her mixed-race kids.
That's important to us, for our kids to be able to grow up without people making so many assumptions about them based on the color of their hair, the color of their skin, their last name.
Columbus Day is currently a federal holiday in the U.S., unlike Indigenous Peoples' Day, whose status varies state by state. On Monday, New York City is holding one of the biggest Columbus Day parades in the country, celebrating.
They said there were no people in Australia, too, because they classified Aboriginal Australians as animals. Oh, yeah.
This is democracy.
Right. It's like, oh, it's not that they didn't know that there were people there. It's just they didn't see them as people. So they're like, great, we're going to bring the people over. Columbus did everything wrong and still hasn't been formally indicted.
Now, democracy.
Ashley, thank you for the 24 months. Mocha Lex, thank you for the 4 months.
.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Christopher Columbus arrived in the Bahamas 527 years ago this week, unleashing a brutal genocide that killed tens of millions of Native people across the hemisphere. Well, cities and states across the United States are acknowledging this devastating history by rejecting the federal holiday of Columbus Day and celebrating Indigenous Peoples' Day. Instead, to honor centuries of Indigenous resistance, Alaska, Maine, Minnesota, New Mexico, North Carolina, South Dakota, Vermont, and Wisconsin have all officially recognized Indigenous Peoples' Day. So have more than 130 cities and counties from Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Dallas to smaller places like Livingston, Kentucky, and Harpers Ferry, West Virginia. Last week, Washington, D.C. became one of the latest to recognize the holiday. Washington, D.C., the District of Columbia, takes its name from Columbus. In a statement before the vote, D.C. Council member-at-large David Grosso said, quote, Columbus Day was officially designated as a federal holiday in 1937, despite the fact Columbus did not discover North America, despite the fact millions of people were already living in North America upon his arrival in the Americas, and despite the fact that Columbus never set foot on the shores of the current United States. Columbus enslaved, colonized, mutilated, and massacred thousands of Indigenous people in the Americas, he said.
Yeah, that's why he's an American hero.
The movement to replace Columbus Day gained momentum in 1992, the 500th anniversary of Columbus's arrival, when Berkeley, California became the first city to make the change. Earlier protests inspired the movement, including the annual National Day of Mourning in Plymouth, Massachusetts, held on Thanksgiving, to challenge the myth of peaceful coexistence between Native people and the English settlers, the Pilgrims. Well, today, Native American communities are celebrating Indigenous Peoples' Day across the country, with sunrise ceremonies at New York City's Randall's Island to California's Alcatraz Island, the former prison and site of a historic Native American occupation and protest against U.S. treatment of Indigenous people 50 years ago. Well, for more, we go to Yagawi Hene Oaks. She is Snipe Clan Mohawk of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy and Executive Director of the American Indian Community House here in New York City. We welcome you to Democracy Now! It's great to have you with us. Can you talk about the significance of this day? We're here in New York. There is a statue to Christopher Columbus in Columbus Circle, and it is not one of those cities that is recognizing Indigenous Peoples' Day.
Well, this day, Indigenous...
I mean, yeah, Columbus is one of the worst criminals I've ever lived. Same with Henry Kissinger. And Henry Kissinger, as we remember, when he finally died, because that son of a bitch lived to be over 100, he was celebrated by Democrats, by Republicans. He was not treated... has never been treated as the heinous war criminal that he was.
People's Day.
Andrew Jackson. I mean, my God.
It's Indigenous Peoples' Day every day for me and my community.
He's still on our money.
You know, we have to fight colonization and try to maintain our identity every single day, because it's been stripped away from us through efforts and I guess just what we've been through and what's been taken from us from Columbus and his crusade. At the American Indian Community House, one of my goals is to sort of reclaim space, our culture, and find a place and presence within society today. So for us, it's not just a day to celebrate us, it's a day to remind everybody else to take responsibility and step up and rescind things like the doctrine of discovery.
You wrote about the Native American population in New York in a New York Daily News article, What New York City's Indigenous People Deserve. You explained that among cities, New York has the largest population of Indigenous peoples. Can you explain the diversity of this population?
Well, from what we know at the Community House, we represent up to 73 different tribal nations in New York City. And based on the census, there's 118,000 Native Americans in New York City. Overall, the entire Native population in the U.S., 70% of natives, of the Native population, are urban natives, and New York City being the largest population of all urban natives. So for us to be here and to not have a permanent space or a Native center or any sort of equity and just erased out of society and culture, it's a tough time for us right now. Right now, it's like we're fighting every single day with the system, and we're not heard of, but days like this, Indigenous Peoples Day, is a reminder to everybody else that we're still here.
Can you explain what the Matahata Fund is?
Oh, the Matahata Fund is great. So that was a few people, what we call settlers. You'll see in the language if you visit the site at manahattafund.org. They approached the community house and worked with a few of our board members in trying to figure out a way that they could contribute to the Native American community in New York City. And together, with all their good minds, they came up with this fund. And it's a sort of campaign where you could donate. $5, $10, or a larger amount. You could do this online. You could make a pledge, which would be every single month, sort of like the Bernie campaign, $24 a month, that one initial investment, or it could carry on through the whole year. That's what it is.
As you
It's
speak,
great, yeah.
we're going to run a slideshow that was taken yesterday at Randall's Island. And if you can talk about the ceremonies that are taking place right
Cypher,
now
thank
as
you for
we
the 2
speak.
months.
There is a sunrise ceremony, both at Randall's Island and also Alcatraz across the country. 50, and this is the period 50 years ago of uprising.
Well,
this past few months, I really learned about how much Indigenous people still struggle. Their suicide rates are very high. It's so sad, never talked about. Yeah. It's, I think an example of how Indigenous people's history really, and current and history, has still just been erased, is that Martin Scorsese was the first filmmaker to depict what happened to the Osage tribe. And that happened decades ago, right? It is a horrific story of murder and all sorts of crimes against the Osage people. And you compare that to when Gabby Petito was killed by her boyfriend. One, just the media being all over that. But two, how immediately after, you had all of these projects in the work, right? Documentaries, true crime galore, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that's an example that shows you how there are so many stories of atrocities that happen to Indigenous people, and not just the Trail of Tears, not just the genocide of Indigenous people when Europeans first came over, but in the last 5, 10, 15, 20, in the last, in the modern era, and how those stories just still do not warrant any care. And it's why we covered the missing and murdered Indigenous women, because of this being this is a genocide against Indigenous women and girls. And it is one that a lot of people aren't aware of because it doesn't get any attention. Deanie, thank you for the 23 months. So it's why something like Indigenous Peoples Day is also a chance to raise awareness for the struggles that Indigenous people still are experiencing, and how, the issues that affect all of us are issues that hit them even harder. Issues like climate change, because they are, Indigenous people are still fighting for their lands. They are fighting against mining and drilling and just fracking projects destroying their territories.
This is a big year, 50 years.
First time tuning in,
anniversary
welcome.
For Alcatraz. It's the 50-year anniversary for the American Indian Community House. With all our ceremonies, we celebrate life. We celebrate what creation has given to us. We celebrate, the water, the earth, the moon, the stars, the skies, the animals, all things that we depend on and need and coexist with equally. In Alcatraz, from what I know, they are taking canoes and they're going to visit the island, and they're having their ceremony there in unison with the ceremonies that are happening here.
Also, the doctrine of discovery, if you could explain what that is. Last year, representatives of Indigenous groups in the U.S. and Canada went to the Vatican to request a retraction of the doctrine of discovery. Explain.
Well, that's the beginning of it all. In 1493, that's when the doctrine of discovery was created.
Pope Alexander VI, Papal Bull.
Yeah. And what that does is that gives dominion for white men or for Christians over non-Christians, or rather Indigenous people, us. If you're not Christian, if you're not Christian people, you're not considered humans, or there's nobody there occupying that land or we basically can't have title to land if we're Indigenous and non-Christian. And that's always been the root cause of all of this right now, colonization. That's the #1 tool.
Finally, the American Indian Community House that you are the head of, it's also the 50th anniversary.
Yeah.
Explain its origins and what you're doing.
Well, 50 years ago, they're basically battling the same fight where we are today. We're trying to reclaim our culture. We're trying to maintain our presence and trying to exercise our strengths and authority for the future, and trying to regain title also. And one of those ways is, for me, one of the directions I want to focus on is bringing attention to the doctrine of discovery. But throughout the past 50 years, it's been a little bit of a struggle. There was some support, and now there's none. 50 years later, the community house is in a place where we have little to no funding. 97% of our funding was taken from us in 2017
by
the federal government. So here we are today.
Which coincides exactly with the time that Indigenous people around the country have been leading the struggle against extractive industries and are on the forefront of the battle around the climate crisis.
Yeah, we're a threat. The moment things like the doctrine of discovery are rescinded, that challenges all title of land and authority.
Well, I want to thank you so much for being with us. Yago Oaks is Snipe Clan Mohawk of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, Executive Director of the American Indian Community House in New York. When we come back, we look at the record of this year's Nobel Peace Prize.
Yeah, I mean, what she said, which is, we are still here. We are still here, thanks to people who have raised their awareness of the true history of Christopher Columbus and what a fucking monster that he was, and that he did not discover America. But this is not something where Indigenous people are living in luxury, that they have no longer had to experience issues going all the way back to when they were first genocided by arriving Europeans. So happy Indigenous Peoples Day. And also, we must continue to raise awareness of Indigenous issues. And it's why, like, it's also just a fucking joke when Kamala Harris is just a fucking joke, but her speaking about being, in the Democratic Party being a big tent, except now you realize how many people have been left out of that tent, right? Because when Joe Biden and Kamala Harris talk about more energy, more oil, more fracking, that directly affects Indigenous people. So words are, words from our government officials saying, happy Indigenous Peoples Day, like, we love Indigenous people are beautiful. Well, your policies aren't reflecting that appreciation of Indigenous people. And that's only, the fracking is only one problem here. In regards to what she just discussed, it's also so sad our little people are aware that racism, colonialism is still such a problem that affects millions, but since it's more baked into our systems, it's less outward and blatant. People just think it's a relic of the past. They think that about a lot of things. They think slavery is a relic of the past. People who think that black people aren't systematically disenfranchised anymore, that black people are not facing the that black people are still not facing the consequences of slavery, when that's just simply not true. You can't enslave people for hundreds of years. You can't you can't strip them of everything and then suddenly go, okay, well, you're no longer enslaved, so you must be good. No lasting problems here. The American government still steals land and resources from Indigenous people. Yeah, they do. But Caroline, we clapped twice. The slavery is off now. Right. It's the government continuing to make, continuing to make life harder for Indigenous people, for black people, for trans people, and pretending like we have, pretending like the past is simply the past and the past does not carry into the present, that those two do not merge. All right. I want to talk about...
It was dinner time at home in Seoul.
I want to talk about Han Kang, who is the South Korean author who just won the Nobel Prize in Literature, and it makes her the first woman in South Korea to win this prize, and I believe she's also the first Asian woman to win the Nobel for Literature. And she is super rad. I was not aware of her before, but you best believe that after reading about her, I have ordered her books, and I'm very excited for them to come. And not only is she an incredible, incredible author and has really taken on the oppressive South Korean government, and she has, along the way, pissed off a lot of men in South Korea. And I'll show you some examples of how South Korean men are reacting to her winning this prize. But when she won, she declined a press conference because of the suffering that is happening in this world and how she feels like it would be, it would be gross to be celebrating her work, which is largely tackles these subjects of which we talk about here on stream: oppression, occupation, misogyny, etc. And how she can't just go, who is she to go and celebrate and have praise lavished upon her when there is so much suffering that is happening at this moment. She's really, really cool. Very, very cool. Okay, so let's learn about her. So she is the first, she's the first Korean, not even just the first Korean woman. She's the first Korean to win the Nobel Prize in Literature. And she cited the global tragedies of the Ukraine-Russia war and the Israel-Palestine conflict as her reason for declining the press conference. Her father is the renowned novelist Han Seong-won, and he conveyed her message during a press conference at the Han Seong-won Literary School, in Jeonhyang, South Jeolla Province. Han Kang told me, with the war intensifying and people being carried out dead every day, how can we have a celebration or a press conference? She said she won't hold a press conference. After the Nobel Prize, she's super rad. After the Nobel Prize in Literature was announced on Thursday evening, Han Seong-won spoke with his daughter and advised her to select a publishing house to hold a press conference. Initially, she agreed, saying she would give it a try, but changed her mind overnight. Her perspective has shifted from being a writer living in Korea to a global writer's consciousness. I, however, could not shake off the feeling of being the father of a prize winner living in Korea, so I ended up arranging this press conference, he said. Han Kang also discouraged her father from holding a celebratory banquet at the literary school. Her father said, I was planning to throw a party here for the local people, but my daughter told me not to do it. She said, please do not celebrate while witnessing these tragic events, referring to the two wars. The Swedish Academy didn't give me this award for us to enjoy, but to stay more clear-headed. After hearing that, I was deeply troubled. After receiving news of her award in a phone call with the Nobel Committee on Thursday, Han Kang expressed that she was very surprised and honored, but has not made further statements. Multiple publishing houses, including Changbi Publishers, which published her notable novels Human Acts and The Vegetarian, and Munhokdong Publishing, which published her poetry collection and novel The Wind is Blowing, had suggested holding a press conference, but as of Friday afternoon, she had not responded. So here's a passage from The Vegetarian, which I ordered, and I'm very excited to read. Congrats to Han Kang, first South Korean writer to win a Nobel Prize and a woman against the backdrop of South Korea's current climate. I got to experience her work firsthand, and all I can say is her writing is a powerful exploration of human emotions, historical trauma, and societal norms. Here's a passage from The Vegetarian. Life is such a strange thing, she thinks, once she has stopped laughing. Even after certain things have happened to them, no matter how awful the experience, people still go on eating and drinking, going to the toilet and washing themselves, living, in other words. And sometimes they even laugh out loud. And they probably have these same thoughts too, and when they do, it must make them cheerlessly recall all the sadness that they have briefly managed to forget. And so, if you're not aware, what's happening in what is South Korea's current climate is that there has been a major backlash against the Me Too movement in South Korea. And men's rights activists, MRA, have gotten even louder and more mobilized. And the South Korean government is just openly misogynistic. And the, what's his name? Yoon Suk Yeol, who's the president of South Korea, he has made statements in the past where he has demonstrated his belief that sexism is not something that is really real, that women are not disenfranchised. The first incel president. Yes, that's what we call him. So anyway, the vegetarian takes on this topic of the oppression of women and does so in a very, in a very fantastical setting where a woman decides to become a vegetarian, and then she slowly descends into a bit of madness and starts to believe that she is a vegetable. So it's very allegorical. It's it's dark, and it's what it's about is a woman's struggle to break free from the confines of society. So it's a metaphor. But anyway, so that's one of her books that she kind of really blew up with. And then here's been a response. Here are just some comments. Here are some comments by Korean men in response to the first Asian woman winning a prize in Nobel Prize in Literature. The Nobel Prize shows how hard a Korean man is living. Korea has been certified as the #1 feminism world. It's actually not. It's actually the opposite. Now the whole world has realized how many tears Korean men are shedding. Oh, I am so sorry. I'm sorry. Should we? You want to talk about how bad things are for you? Should we throw a party? Should we invite Bella Hadid? Reasonable doubt about a Korean woman's acceptance of the Nobel Prize. The Nobel Prize for Literature has long lost its authority because it was stained with a PC. They gave this award to let the world know that Korean women are stupid, right? LOL. To show everyone how bad a Korean woman has written. Korean women bugs are likely to go to bookstores again and buy books that they won't read. Effing R word that values being seen. They will buy a book and not read a single letter, LOL. Does the Nobel Prize give back your rotten womb and youth? Fucking Korean women are excited about the Nobel Prize, which is nothing. Honestly, it's ridiculous that Han Kang gets a Nobel Prize for the vegetarian. It's a trend to admire feminists. There's nothing we can do. You get a Nobel Prize, why don't you go to the army? Is it a Swedish feminist country? The feminist novel The Vegetarian won the Nobel Prize, LOL. Winning Nobel Prize, so what, LOL. A Korean woman's trash book wins a Nobel Prize, LOL. It sucks. So awesome. Yeah, South Korean men are doing well. Doing well. All normal and good over there.
Can you believe Nobel Literature Prize winner Han Kang's books were blacklisted in South Korea? So she's the first South Korean ever and the first Asian woman.
Okay, it is Kong. I thought it was Kong, and then I thought it was Kang.
To receive this prize. And it turns out a former South Korean president, the Park Geun-hye administration, blacklisted one of her most notable novels, Human Acts. She thought...
That's the other crazy thing, y'all. Her writing has been suppressed in South Korea. Her books have been blacklisted. And this woman went on to win the Nobel Prize in Literature. And now South Korea is like, this is one of ours. We certainly have never worked to suppress your writing. And now they're like bragging about it because Han is the first Korean to win this award.
The book, even though it's a novel, was very critical of her father's regime. Her father is Park Chung-hee, who led a very brutal military regime. And this year, her most famous novel, The Vegetarian, was banned in a province in South Korea called Gyeonggi-do. So it was reported that Gyeonggi-do's Department of Education put The Vegetarian on one of their banned books list for students because they thought it was very harmful to students in terms of sex education. It's important to note when she won the Nobel Literature Prize, the committee praised her for her intense poetic prose that confronts historical traumas. Now with this huge international acclaim, a lot of South Koreans are coming out saying the South Korean government should feel ashamed for trying to censor these books and thinking that it was ever harmful to people. Okay, so well, what are these books about? What makes them so controversial? First, The Vegetarian is about an ordinary Korean woman who suddenly decides to become vegetarian and later proceeds to become a vegetable herself. And refusing to eat meat and becoming a vegetarian is seen as an act of defiance, and her actions lead her to become more and more isolated from her husband, her family, and society in general. Inhuman Acts is a novel about a boy who dies during the democratic uprisings in Gwangju that happened on May 18th, 1980. The Gwangju uprising is when thousands of people came out to protest, and mostly college students at the time were massacred on the streets by the South Korean government. And this event is really special to Hong Kong because she is from Gwangju herself, and although she wasn't there herself physically to witness what happened in Gwangju because her family had moved to Seoul, she says that that event and seeing the pictures and videos of the aftermath really shaped her view on the capacity of human violence. And in this old interview where she talks about her writing process for Human Acts, it really brought me to tears.
가장 많이 느꼈던 감정은 고통인 것 같아요. 압도적인 고통. 소설 쓰는 동안에는 거의 매일 울었어요. 당시 생존자들의 자살률이 11%라고 하는데 아직도 끝나지 않은 거죠. 마지막으로 쓴 문장이 그거예요. 죽지 말아요.
She's a fucking boss. She is amazing. I cannot believe that it's like one of those, where have you been all my life? I mean, she's been here. I just haven't been here. You know? But yeah, everything I have read about her and her work is just the raddest. She's amazing. Lur Gaze, thank you for the tier 1. Sarah, thank you for 9 months.
그 말을 쓰고 싶었어요.
And this is not her only book that's based on a historical traumatic event. Another book I recommend is called We Do Not Part. It's about two Korean women and their friendship. It's set on Jeju Island and it discusses a part of South Korean history that's hidden and not as well known, and it's called the April 3rd Massacre. Over the span of many years, up to 30,000 people were killed on Jeju Island for protesting the division of the peninsula. Even though these books are based on historical events set in South Korea, these books are resonating with people all over the world because at the end of the day, they're about friendship, love, and just human nature, discussing the fragility of life. Now the Western world with this Nobel Literature Prize is waking up to Hong Kong and her novels. She has braved this culture of censorship and attempts to silence her by coming out repeatedly with stronger works each time. And a lot of literature critics are saying that it's very fitting that the first Korean Nobel Literature Prize winner is a woman, because most of the groundbreaking and provocative work coming out of contemporary Korean literature right now is written by women.
Yup, it is. Women are really, really having a moment in South Korea, from women's movements to women's literature. Welcome in, everyone. Hello. Hi. Girls get it done. Babylon, thank you for the 3 months. And there is backlash to all of this. We talked before about the proliferation of deep fake videos in South Korea, of how most deep fake videos are now originating from South Korea because they are being used in these private chat rooms. And they are being used to target schoolgirls. So it's been a big form of harassment for against female students. Are male students using, creating and then using deep fake porn videos of female students to harass them?
When she got the call from Stockholm, Hong Kong becoming the...
For everyone just getting here, we are talking about Hong Kong. She is the South Korean author who just won the Nobel Prize for Literature, and she is the first Korean and first Asian woman to win this prize. And she turned down a press conference, and her reasoning was that there is so much suffering happening, and she cited Palestine, of course, and Ukraine, and pointed to this slaughter and this suffering. And she in her work is fighting systems of power, and she felt like doing a press conference to lavish praise on her and to celebrate her takes the focus off of why she writes and what her writing is about. It's extremely queen behavior.
First South Korean, the first woman from Asia to win the Nobel Literature Prize, the poetess and novelist who won the 2016 Booker Prize for her novel The Vegetarian, honored for her, quote, intense poetic prose that confronts historical traumas. Charlie James has more.
This year's the Nobel Prize winner from Japan also used his press conference to talk about Gaza. Oh, that's what somebody was talking about yesterday. I did not see that, but I would like to watch that moment.
Prize in Literature breaks with the award's history, given to a woman outside of the West.
The Nobel Prize in Literature for 2024 is awarded to South Korean author Han Kang for her intense poetic prose that confronts historical traumas and exposes the fragility of human life.
53-year-old novelist Han Kang is no stranger to literary prizes. She won the International Booker Prize in 2016 for her novel The Vegetarian, in which a woman upends Korean norms by deciding to stop eating meat and suffers horrific consequences. Despite her prior successes, Kang was caught off guard by her win.
I just finished dinner with my son, and in Korea it is just like 8 o'clock in the evening, so it's very peaceful evening. I was really surprised.
Kang is just the 18th woman to win the prize out of 120 laureates, and she's the first South Korean winner. The prize includes a $1 million cash award, which comes from an endowment left by the prize's creator, Swedish inventor Alfred Nobel. The laureates are invited to receive their awards at ceremonies on December 10th, the anniversary of Nobel's death.
For more, let's go to Aquebogue, New York. Journalist Yoonhee Hong, the author of such books as The Birth of Korean Cool, How One Nation is Conquering the World Through Pop Culture, joins us. Good to see you, Yoonhee.
Hello, François.
I think, too, the reaction to female authors who are writing about the, the systemic oppression of women in Korea, the fact that those female authors and their books are resonating so strongly with a lot of South Koreans and a lot of women in South Korea tells you where they're at right now in society, where a lot of women are just so fed up. They are tired. They are tired of the misogyny baked into their culture. The book that Chatter sent me, Kim Ji-young, born 1982, that came out in 2016, and that is a novel by Cho Nam-ju, and it is another book that deals with an everyday woman who her entire life has been, her entire life has dealt with issues of sexism and misogyny, and it's presented in that book is written in a way that it's almost clinical, and it's a look back on her life. So the book opens up and she is married. She has a 1-year-old baby, and suddenly she starts speaking as other people. Like, she is her mother one day, she's her grandmother one day, she's a female friend she went to school with who ended up dying of cancer 10 years previously, and her husband's all concerned and eventually takes her to the doctor. That's only a small part of the book, and then the rest of the book is looking back on her life from when she was born leading up to when she suddenly and mysteriously started in inhabiting the voices and lives of other women in her life. It's very, very interesting. But all that to be said is, I think there is a real hunger for that kind of literature in South Korea, as they are, as South Korean women are choosing to do things like completely reject men until equality for women has been achieved, where South Korean women and girls are facing just a shit ton of harassment from young men who are now utilizing technology and utilizing AI to harass them. And they have a president who is an incel, an actual incel president. The book is fictional, but pretty well reads like a case study. Yeah, it's fictional, but she also cites a lot of data and actual historical events throughout the book. Like, she has her references at the bottom.
Were you surprised?
No. I mean, I was surprised it happened this year, but for the last couple of decades, South Korea has become sort of the bard of human misery. And first this emerged in film with films like Parasite, and 20 years ago with Old Boy, and these explore themes that are universal about the sort of impossibility of being human. And I think it was just a matter of time before the Nobel Committee realized the universality of the Korean story and how uniquely skilled modern Korea is at telling this story.
Yeah, because
love me some Old Boy.
When we think of France's great cultural time,
I've heard good things about If I Had Your Face by Frances Cha. It's about a novel about beauty standards for Korean women. Ooh, sounds
after
good.
the Second World War, it was in rebellion to a conservative society. It feels like through her writing, it's kind of the same.
I would say that's an incredibly apt analogy, because I would compare the writings of Hong Kong to Camus or Sartre, in fact, because they're about how the impossibility of being natural and being human. Nature is completely the opposite of human existence. We're the only creatures who do things that are not good for us, that self-harm. And the idea with existentialism was, well, we did not ask for this. We did not sign up for this. Why are we here? And there's this awareness of how alienated we are from every other creature on Earth that Sartre and
you should check out Convenience Store Women. I've read that.
You write about, and there's a sort of futility. And
Very
one
good.
of the things that they wrote about a lot is death, and it's not so much that with futility comes a desire to die exactly, but Sigmund Freud wrote about a death drive, which he called the Todestrieb, which is not that everyone wants to commit suicide, because that's too violent and gruesome, but everyone wants to be inert. And that's basically what's happening in The Vegetarian. She basically wants to become a vegetable. Or the example that Freud gives is that everyone wants to kind of be a rock. Not Iraq, the country, but a rock. And
so
I think this is, yes, go ahead, sorry.
I was going to.
I knew Caroline Kwan was incredibly based in literature. Don't get me wrong. There have been long periods where I don't read at all. And then I go through like a binge reading period where I'll read a book and go, oh my God, I love reading. I miss reading. And then I go back to not reading again. But I'm always open. I'm always open to book suggestions. It's one of those where I have a long list of books. I have a lot of books on my bookshelf I still haven't read yet, but always open to new suggestions. Always also open to getting books, like getting sent Kim Ji-young. That was great. I read that, and I read that in about one sitting. People have asked me before if they can send books, and as long as they're good. Everything for Everyone is a great book about liberation. Cool. I also think it's good to I think other people in chat who may appreciate the book suggestions. What did you pick for Mizkif? Oh boy, I still haven't decided because I don't think he's going to read it, but I think it's one of those. I'll still try. Yeah, don't send Caroline your unpublished manuscript about the life of a Twitch streamer. Do you like audiobooks? I prefer to read an actual copy of a book. I also don't like reading books on Kindle. I just like curling up with a book. I like to have it in front of me because I sometimes like to mark up on the pages. But anyway, usually if I'm listening to something, I prefer to listen to a podcast. So I've done audiobooks before, and I get why people have turned to audiobooks. My preference is just always an actual hard copy of a book. Plus, I like having my book collection, you know? Love having a book collection and giving books to people around me to read. Yeah, it's great. I mean, one day my dream is, one, to have a fourth wine cellar, but two, to have a library. Dream library would be Beauty and the Beast. I mean, come on. But obviously we'll make do with a library on a smaller scale. Little town, it's a quiet village. Every day, like the one before. Can I be a librarian there? Yeah, isn't it just, I don't know, libraries are such a happy place. They're such a great place. I want a library, and then I want a little nook. You know, I want a window, and I want a nook, and I want it to be cozy, and I want it to be a place where you can just curl up with a book. A dream. A dream.
To say, so that's the universality in Hong Kong's writing. What makes it specifically Korean?
Have you read any Carmen Maria Machado? I actually have. A friend of mine suggested Her Body and Other Parties, and it was an amazing book. So I also recommend that one. If you haven't read Her Body and Other Parties, it is gorgeous. Gorgeous. It's a short story collection.
Well, as you say, it's coming off of a period of, Korea, if it went from being one of the poorest countries in the world to a very, very wealthy country, and with it came this sense of being thrown completely asunder from their identity. one thing that that would be helpful to understand about Korean culture is that they are very attached to nature. The original religion in Korea was animism. They believed that spirits lived in the trees and the mountains. It's sort of like Celtic mythology, and there's still a very strong reverence for nature. And modern life, capitalism, technology, and things that Korea excels at, have made Koreans have a reckoning at how distant they've become from being Korean, from the trees and the mountains. I mean, I'm not kidding, actually, and from nature. And because of Korea's unprecedentedly rapid progress between poverty and richness, they kind of, within one generation, people were able to see human alienation
Thank you for the 24
progress,
months.
basically. And I think that's unique to Korea, and that's why they're uniquely qualified to tell this particular kind of story.
And you said at the outset that you're not surprised that she gets the Nobel Literature Prize. Perhaps it's just about the timing a little bit. And, it's something you write about as well, just the fact that the soft power of South Korea just goes from strength to strength.
Yes, it's impossible to deny. And what's interesting, though, about this is, Korean popular culture has been obviously on the rise in the last 10 years or so. But, historically, pop culture and high culture have always been very separate. This is just sort of a universal thing. And I think that the Nobel Committee saw sort of past the glitz of K-pop and BTS and so forth, and they were able to take seriously the sort of philosophical underpinnings of all of the glitz that you see. So it is and it is not related. This win is and it is not related to the pop cultural boom, but definitely it's now part of the ecosystem where sort of a rising tide, what is that expression? A rising tide raises all boats.
How's she perceived in South Korea?
Well, I think what happens frequently in South Korea, and this is not unique to that culture, is there's a great suspicion about artists in general as being sort of troublemakers, and especially if they're women, they face tremendous criticism. There's a strong men's rights movement currently in South Korea, for example, which is why, in turn, there are so many Korean novelists who are women.
Yep.
And so I would say that she also suffered a lot of slings and arrows just by being an outspoken woman who had the audacity to sort of air dirty.
Also, although, makeup or no makeup does not a woman make, but she has especially, she's rejected a lot of the feminine. And I think that's also been something that's pissed men off. She specifically does not wear makeup. She does not really feminize herself. And she is also writing on these issues. And it's pissing a lot of dudes off. She is pissing a lot of dudes off. And you know how I feel? If a woman is pissing a lot of men off, she's probably super cool. Probably.
Laundry, air Korean dirty laundry overseas, basically, and now she's been redeemed, and now suddenly she's a national hero. So
suddenly she's a hero, and you could feel that already back in 2016 when she wins the Man Booker Prize.
Yes. I think that was, that's always, not always. I mean, that there, people say that the Booker is a horse race. And the Nobel Prize is, sort of something holistic. And if you can win both, that's pretty much, she could retire now. I mean, it's I'm very proud of her.
Final question for you, Uni. If we're going to start with one work of hers, for people who've never read her novels and her poetry, where would you begin?
Well, I would definitely begin with The Vegetarian because, as I said, it speaks to something that everyone feels, this malaise that everyone feels but doesn't know what the words are. Her most recent book is Greek Lessons, which is a little bit more, I don't know, niche is the right word, but it's a book about books, basically. So if you're into
Would anybody ever be interested if we did a Quantourage book club? I mean, I know book clubs so frequently are created and then die shortly after. Like how many book clubs lie 6 feet in the ground? But I've been thinking, we've been talking a lot about books. And I think it would be fun. It's something maybe we could do. We could have a Discord channel, or we can do a, hey, on this day, like, okay, here's a book we're going to read. And then 1 month from now or whatever, we can have a discussion on it. I don't know. Just rough planning, but I literally can't read. Okay. So first we're going to have a class to teach reading. How about that? We'll have a class to teach reading, and then we'll have the book club. There is a Discord channel. Okay. All right. So there is a Discord channel that died before it could live. Derp tried to run a book club in the Discord before. All right. So this is continuing with the trend of book clubs not having any life to them. Nobody showed up. Oh, poor Derp. Poor Derp trying to do it. Okay. Why these chatters are not in the book channel talking books? Y'all are fake. Oh, you guys are being called out. I mean, I didn't even know we had a book club channel. I didn't even know. But a lot of people seem very excited in chat. So maybe we revitalize book club. Maybe we dig it out of the ground. And we can I don't know. We can do something book clubby. What if Caroline reads to us? Yeah, that's how y'all will read the books, is just me reading it to you. Okay, let's think about it. We'll think about it. We don't have to make a decision now. I think it seems like a nice idea, but book clubs always seem like a nice idea. I can't wait to show y'all the episode that I helped film, that I was a part of, that my friend Henry, who was the director of Peak Season, friend of the show, and also friend in real life, he's doing a series, and they're all like 10 to 15 minute short films, or episodes in this series. And the one that I'm in is about a book club. It's very funny. And I think he's done editing it. So maybe I can get a link and we can watch that on stream too. I can't do book clubs. It always ends in the way of feeling like work, even if I'd read the book in a night on my own. Well, book clubs just start very strong. People, there's a lot of enthusiasm. Hogan, thank you for the gifted to Book Club Pro. There's a lot of enthusiasm for book clubs, and then that enthusiasm is snuffed out. So maybe it's something that we try again, and it ends up in the grave, but I think it could be fun. Maybe I'll give us like 6 months. Okay. You have 6 months to read this book. Maybe that will be enough time. Okay, that works. Okay, you must finish this book before the midterm elections. We can do short story and essay collections so people can pick up and drop off at any time. Yeah, I like that. I think that's probably good. Keep it short. Keep it short. All right. Well, food for thought.
Sort of Italo Calvino or postmodernism. It's a book about it's about translation, basically. And then I would recommend that.
All right, 2 recommendations for the price of 1. Uni Hung, so many thanks for joining us here on France 24.
Thank you, François.
Stay with us.
The streets of Stockholm's Old Town can feel like they were created to inspire a novel. Sweden has the most winners of the Nobel Literature Prize of any country for its population. But the historic trend of choosing male writers from the West was avoided this year by the Swedish Academy.
The Nobel Prize in Literature for 2024 is awarded to South Korean author Han Kang for her intense poetic prose that confronts historical traumas and exposes the fragility of human life.
Can the first book be The Vegetarian? I already read it, so I won't have to. I mean, I ordered it and it hasn't come yet, but when it comes, I will be prioritizing trying to read it. So maybe.
Han's books include The Vegetarian, The White Book,
or maybe
and
we start
Human
off with
Acts,
something
which describes a massacre in her home city of Gwangju in 1980.
Han Kang has been described as one of her country's best-kept secrets. She's also the first South Korean to win a Nobel Prize for Literature.
Her $1.1 million prize will be awarded in Stockholm in December, but she may have another reason to travel to Sweden.
We're going to invite her to Rinkeby library where she would come and we would greet her.
So you think the Nobel laureate for literature will come to your school?
Yeah, no, not our school, a library in Rinkeby. Last year, Jan Fosse, who won, he also came, and this has been going on for 7 years.
Book lovers in Seoul welcomed news of their new laureate, who is also the first woman from anywhere in Asia to win the prize. Paul Rees, Al Jazeera, Stockholm.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest.
Okay. Alrighty. Yo. Well, y'all. Serpentine Rising, thank you for the raid. Thank you for the raid. Okay, we're at like 3 hours. There's a Democracy Now video on the Japanese peace winner. Oh, okay. Wait.
/give. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org. I'm Amy Goodman. Today, the 2024 Nobel Peace Prize was awarded to the Japanese group Nihon Hidankyo, a grassroots organization of survivors of the U.S. atomic bombing of Hiroshima on August 6, 1945, and Nagasaki 3 days later on August 9th, 45. The survivors of the only 2 nuclear bombs ever used in conflict went on to dedicate their lives to struggle for a nuclear-free world for nearly 8 decades. Known as Hibakusha, the atomic bomb survivors are being recognized for, quote, demonstrating through witness testimony that nuclear weapons must never be used again. The Nobel Committee noted the taboo against nuclear weapons use now, quote, was now under pressure. This is Nobel Committee Chair Jürgen Wagner-Friednes.
Next year will mark 80 years since 2 American atomic bombs killed an estimated of 120,000 inhabitants of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. A comparable number died of burn and radiation injuries in the months and years that followed. Today's nuclear weapons have far greater destructive power.
Man, I remember one of the first books that One of the first books that I read on the impact of the nuclear bombs was Sadako and the Thousand Paper Cranes. I was very young when I read this book, and I just remember sobbing reading this book. And it's, you know, it's something where the atomic bombs, and are Americans still justifying the atomic bomb use? I think many Americans for a long time have recognized that the use of the atomic bombs was it was barbaric. It was horrifying. And Japan had already surrendered, and it was a show of strength by the United States. It was a look what we can do, and look what we will do. So, no, I think the atomic bomb, I think the usage of the atomic bombs is something that, you know, nowadays a lot of people understand to be something that was not a necessity. It was just fucking awful. I was taught that they refused to surrender in Australia. Yeah, I mean, I think I can't tell you exactly when that changed. Like, I'm sure when I was in school that was what was taught as well, and I feel like maybe it's still taught, but it also seems to be a common understanding and common knowledge, maybe I'm totally wrong on this, that Japan had surrendered. I think the base opinion is what is taught in schools, and I remember it being presented as the only option. Well, I think they omit that information. They're like, we are not going to teach this. I can't tell you, though, at what point I learned that Japan had surrendered. I don't know. And I don't think I did learn that in school, considering everything else we learned and, you know, and what we didn't learn.
They can kill millions and would impact the climate catastrophically. A nuclear war could destroy our civilization.
After the Nobel Peace Prize was announced, the co-chair of Nihon Hidankyo, Toshiyuki Mimaki, spoke to reporters in Tokyo.
What? Nihon Hidankyo? How did Nihon Hidankyo? It can't be real. It can't be real. We will appeal to the world, as we always have done, for the abolition of nuclear weapons and the achievement of an everlasting peace.
I learned Japan was going to surrender before the nukes from Second Thought on YouTube. He's great. He's really, really great. I've watched a lot of his vids.
Why Nihon Hidankyo? I thought for sure it would be the people working so hard in Gaza, as we've seen.
That was Toshiyuki Mimaki, the co-chair of Nihon Hidankyo, which won the 2024 Nobel Peace Prize today. He wept as he spoke. He went on to say, quote, "In Gaza, bleeding children are being held by their parents. It's like in Japan 80 years ago." For more, we go to Boston, where we're joined by Joseph Gerson, longtime peace and disarmament activist who has worked closely with Nihon Hidankyo for the past 40 years, president of the Campaign for Peace, Disarmament, and Common Security, former vice president of the International Peace Bureau, and worked with AFSC. We welcome you to Democracy Now! In a moment, we're going to hear from a Habakasha. But can you talk about the significance, Joe, of this group being awarded the Nobel Peace Prize?
Well, I think the two things to say. First of all, the courage of these people is staggering. I mean, to understand that the situation that they faced, literal hell. I mean, the descriptions of people that I know who, suffered burns, saw people with their eyeballs hanging out, ghosts, the whole city destroyed in an instant. I mean, these people literally survived hell. And they turned their experiences, their suffering, into what Wilfred Burchett, the first Western journalist to go into Hiroshima, later described as the most important force for the abolition of nuclear weapons among humanity. And then to say that it could not come at a better time. What most people don't understand is the increasing danger of nuclear war at this point. Not only in Ukraine, also, especially as the United States and China confront one another, the reality that among all the nuclear powers, the threshold for nuclear use is decreasing, and all of the nuclear powers are in the process of so-called modernizing their.
Yeah, remember when Israel was not invited to the ceremony, the Japanese ceremony commemorating the atomic bombing of Nagasaki? It's a peace ceremony that happens every year. And because Israel is anything but peace, Japan decided to not invite them to the ceremony this year. And just the fucking irony, man, of the United States, the very country that bombed Nagasaki and Hiroshima, getting upset that Israel was not invited. They're like, this is not fair. We condemn Israel not being invited to this peace ceremony, which commemorates the atomic bombing that was done by us. Wild.
Their nuclear arsenals. This is a very dangerous moment. And what the Nobel Committee has done has been, in a way, to answer the Oppenheimer film. We must, as the Hibakusha say, recognize that human beings and nuclear weapons cannot coexist, and we have to work for their abolition.
And very interesting that the head of the group said he compared Gaza today to Japan after the atomic bombing and the threats of Israel to perhaps blow up a nuclear site in Iran. I wanted to go back to 2016 when Democracy Now! Spoke to Setsuko Thurlow, a survivor of the U.S. bombing of Hiroshima in 1945. She is a member of Nihon Hidankyo.
I was a 13-year-old grade 8 student at the girls' school, and I was mobilized by the Army, together with a group of about 30 schoolmates, and we were trained to act as decoding assistants. And that very day, being Monday, we were to start the day's work, the full-fledged decoding assistant. At 8 o'clock, we had the morning assembly, and the Major and I gave us a pep talk. And we said, we will do our best for Emperor's sake. And at that moment, I saw the bluish-white flash in the windows. I was on the second floor of the wooden building, which was 1 mile or 1.8 kilometers away from the ground zero.
Oh my God.
And after seeing the flash, I had the sensation of floating in the air. All the buildings were flattened by the blast and falling. And obviously, the building I was in was falling, and my body was falling together with it. That's the end of my recollection. Then I regained my consciousness, and when I regained, I found myself in a total darkness and the silence. I tried to move my body, but I couldn't, so I knew I was faced with death. I thought, finally, Americans got us. Then I started hearing the whispering voices of my classmates who were around me in the same room. Mother, help me. God, help me. And all of a sudden, strong male voice said, don't give up. I'm trying to free you. Keep moving, keep pushing. and you see the sun ray coming through that opening. Get moving toward that direction, crawl. And that's what I did in the total darkness. I didn't see anything. But by the time I came out, the building was on fire. That meant all my classmates who were with me, about 30 of them, were burned to death alive. And two other girls managed to come out. Three of us looked around outside. And although it happened in the morning, it was dark as twilight. And as our eyes got used to recognize things, those dark moving objects happened to be human beings. It was like a procession of ghosts. I say ghosts because they simply did not look like human beings. Their hair was rising upwards, and they were covered with blood and dirt, and they were burned and blackened and swollen. Their skin and the flesh were hanging, and parts of the bodies were missing. Some were carrying their own eyeballs, and as they collapsed onto the ground, their stomach burst open and the intestines start stretching out.
That was Setsuko.
My God, her closing her eyes and reliving the day, the hour, the minute that it happened. And you can just see how she's right back there. I mean, the crimes against humanity that was the dropping of the atomic bombs, which was not necessary to win the war, is something that, you know, you think, look, America is not the only country that has committed atrocities, but by God, some of the largest atrocities that have taken place and the indirect or direct hand that we had in it, it's horrible.
Thurlow, speaking on Democracy Now! In 2016.
Wow.
A survivor of the U.S. atomic bombing of Hiroshima, also a member of Nihon Hidankyo, which just won the Nobel Peace Prize. She's lived in Canada for decades. She is well over 90 years old.
Oh,
thanks so much to Joseph Gerson, president of the Campaign for Peace, Disarmament, and Common Security, and former vice president of the International Peace Bureau. Democracy Now! Is...
Oh, my goodness. Wow. So that is who won the Nobel Peace Prize, and how touching but also sad that the atomic bomb survivors said that they thought that this, one of them said that they thought that this would go to Gaza because of what they have endured. Oh, and just the commonalities there, people who have suffered, people who have suffered atrocities, and the right thing when you have suffered an atrocity is to not wish for anybody else to suffer. And the lesson that we should be taking every time atrocities have been committed on this planet is never again. Never can this happen. Should this ever happen again? This is not something where we should just keep having these days of commemorating of horrific things, horrific events that occurred. Yeah, never again. Then this shit weeks later. There's a lot of amazing literature on that period of history, the atomic bomb, World War II from the perspective of Japanese Americans who were interned, because don't forget that happened. That was FDR. The great FDR, who also signed the executive order to throw Japanese Americans in internment camps, which was horrific in and of itself and led to, long-lasting consequences. Crazy. I know. Like, we had concentration camps here. Yeah, we did. These were Japanese Americans. A lot of people who were born, a lot of Japanese people who were born in America, and they were thrown into these camps in their home country. About 1,600 Japanese Americans died in internment camps during World War II, but the exact number is difficult to determine because many names were lost or misspelled after the war. Yeah, these were U.S. citizens. Yes. U.S. citizens, a lot of whom were born in this country. And the U.S. government did that. So, that being said, today has just felt like another stream of look at all these horrible things, or remember this horrible thing. And I just want to take us back to the Lord of the Rings Samwise clip. There's good in this world worth fighting for, Mr. Frodo. And my head is still killing me. My head is... There's like a knife being driven into my skull. So I'm probably going to end stream there. Because no amount of water or ibuprofen or caffeine is doing jack shit. I feel like I can only half open my eyes right now. And my head is hurting enough that I'm sorry I cannot go through the list of people who commented under my tweet and try to find somebody who is currently live. So I am just going to send you over to Will, so also he knows that I am done streaming. Yeah, not great looking at screens when your head really hurts, but I would like to end the stream. I would like to end the stream by reminding you all to take care of yourselves. Free Palestine, of course, free Palestine, free people all over this world. And don't ever let anybody invalidate you. Don't ever let anybody tell you that that your existence doesn't matter. That you are that you are not a human, because some people have a very limited definition of who gets to be a human being. And I will see you tomorrow. Yes, I will see you tomorrow. Will the VODs be available? Some of the VODs the past few weeks. The VODs from the last couple days, I think, are highlights. I think Anonymous highlighted them. But yes, the VOD will be available. And yeah, I think that's all I got. Thank y'all. I'm sorry this is a shorter stream. It's funny because I'm sure there are streamers who regularly do 3-hour streams, but it's short for me. I just tuned in and heard, so I will see you tomorrow. Yeah, I've got a headache that's been real brewing for the last couple hours. So anyway, take care. Be well. I will return tomorrow. And have a great rest of your night.